And we don't have any other segments. We're just rolling in a little bit of hey, how you doing, and then just boom 1, boom 2, boom 3.
Pretty much.
We're out in an hour, and the people get some recommendations.
With three of us, I doubt it's going to be an hour, but we shall see.
I mean, I'm bringing what I would describe as a short game, so we'll see. We'll see.
So, it's IndieQuest. Welcome. Okay, wait. Is that how I enter this? No, it's not. Hello, everybody. Welcome to IndieQuest, a celebration of the indie and obscure. My name's Josh. I'm here with my two co-hosts, Seth, also known as Captain Drachma. How's it going, man?
It is going very well. It is super dark. I know we commented on this one other time we were recording, but it's even darker this time because daylight savings time officially ended here. So at 5 o'clock, basically, it was dark, which is kind of wild. But I don't know about you guys, but I don't mind it being dark sometimes. Like, that's prime video game time, and in our case, prime indie game time. So what do you think, Steve?
I'm the same way. The very first day that it transitions to being dark early, it does throw me off. Like, in this case, I was out of town visiting my family for the weekend. And they live about 4 hours north up on the Iron Range in Minnesota. And I left there at like 11 in the morning or so. And, granted, I stopped at a video game store here and there on my way down. But it's about a 4-hour drive. And as I was getting into town, the sun was going down. Even though I left at 11 in the morning, the sun was going down when I got back in. And I was like, that's the whole day. What happened to that day? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I still have like 7 hours before I would normally go to bed. What is happening? So, but other than that one instance, I'm with you. I like when it gets dark early because I'm a night owl. Like, night is my place. I like how like quiet and peaceful it is in the evening. Stars are objectively better than a blue sky, even though, no shade on a blue sky. And yeah, I'm always at my maximum comfiest playing games when it's dark out. I don't know what it is about it being nighttime outside, but it definitely adds like a 2x multiplier to whatever I'm playing.
Yeah, it's that feeling when you go inside and it's nice and cozy and warm and it's been all cold and it's all dark outside and you kind of bundle up. Yep, the best feeling.
Yeah, very much so. And it's kind of been a collective shift here in Minnesota because not only is it now suddenly dark at like 4:45, but also we on the last week of October had like a real hot stretch of like 60s and 70s, and then now it's dropped and it's like in like the 30s, and every day there's like a little bit of a threat of snow. So it's just suddenly like, all right, we've entered winter hibernation mode in an instant. Time to tuck in and play some indies.
Yeah, that I imagine that happens here a little bit too, where it's a pretty quick transition where I haven't quite gotten all of the leaves out of my yard, which is a huge bummer when I all of a sudden see snow falling. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I literally couldn't get them other than taking a pair of tweezers and pulling them off the tree myself so that I can beat the snow. I just it seems to happen the same way every year here as well. So, so far so good. Most of the leaves are down, and it's been pretty nice here. But next week, same thing. Steve, it's supposed to get down to like the 30s and 40s. So I'm still looking forward to it. It's prime fall, prime indie game weather.
I mean, if we're doing a little bit of yard talk before the indie games, I gotta say it worked out perfectly. All the leaves fell off the trees in my yard. I raked some of them. I usually don't like bag them up or anything. I rake the ones near the easement into the easement, and then I mulch up the rest because it's like, yeah, if they're small enough, it's fine.
Yeah.
But they all fell. I had that week of beautiful like 60-degree weather to go do all the yard work, and then we just a day or two ago had like a ridiculously windy day, like winds of like 30, 40 miles an hour, and it just took them all out of my yard. My yard is basically clean at this point. It's ideal October in terms of yard maintenance.
We had that exact same wind. So for anybody that doesn't know, I am a huge Buckeye fan. So I watched the Ohio State Buckeyes, specifically football. And they ended up actually playing in Northwestern, which is about halfway between Steve and I, because it's in Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. And it was super windy there, like almost unplayable, like in terms of throwing the ball. So the same time where you were getting all that wind, shortly after that, I was getting all that wind. And I went out to do yard work as well, because our town actually will collect leaves off the street, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. So you can line up your street, and they'll bring a truck, and it's just like a huge vacuum sucks it into the back of this truck and into like this crate, and then they go dump it, and it's like compost somewhere, right? But I went out there to do that, and the leaves are already blowing, and I'm like, I need to mow one more time before it's all said and done. So I ended up just mulching them up, and then the next time I look out, most of them have blown away, but a lot of them have like collected into very like big but confined piles in like all the crevices around my house.
Corner of the sidewalk and stuff.
Yep,
exact same thing. Nice. So funny. Josh, what's your leaf game looking like? What's the yard game looking like?
Yard game? I mean, I live in an apartment complex, so that's a little hard to say, but I do work a job where I run a route, so I've been out in the elements dealing with piles of leaves and rain and all that fun stuff. So it's been kind of like, at work, I actually kind of enjoy the cold because it's better than just like dying, like sweating my butt off. So it's either be a little cold, be a little damp, or be sweating. So what's the choice here? So I've been enjoying that.
Yeah, no good options there in any regard. But
yeah,
yeah.
Well, speaking of, to rewind back a little bit, going inside, playing some indie games. We got some indie picks for everybody today. Who wants to go first? I can.
Why don't you? We all. I don't know why we're all being precious with our picks, but none of us want to go first. We're like, I don't want to be the first one.
I was just waiting for Josh to just call on one of us, and it's like, okay, I'll go. If Josh wants me to go, I'll go.
I think it's because I'm feeling a little rusty. You know, I wasn't with you guys last episode. I think we did the OST before that. It's been a solid month and change since I broke down an indie game for you. I need to hear one of the pros show me how it's done. Josh,
one of the pros.
Please explain your game to me.
Okay, I'm actually bringing a game we've talked about on an IQS OST because I brought a track from it. And this is a game I've been wanting to bring because we don't talk about this genre enough on the show, I would say. And I decided to bring Hat in Time to the IndieQuest quest log today. And this is a 3D platformer by Gears for Breakfast. It's a small independent studio, obviously, and it's a game very inspired by the classic 3D platformers from Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario 64. Has a little bit of Metroidvania-like tendencies because there's actual like hats. Obviously, that's the whole gimmick of the game. Each hat you gets a different power, and then in some levels have secret areas that you can access by getting new powers. So it's kind of a nice thing. You go in, you do the challenge to get these little hourglass collectibles. So the whole premise of the game is you're this cute little chick, hat kid, and your time machine breaks, and there's these little like hourglasses everywhere you have to collect. And what the bad guy's trying to do is a little girl named Mustache Girl who's trying to basically take over all the timelines with these little things. So basically it's a collectathon where you're collecting all these little hourglasses and various things around the map. And yeah, it's a super fun and charming game.
Very much so. To hone in on one thing, because you rolled right past it. For anyone that's not aware,
okay,
yeah, your rival in this game is Mustache Girl, which is literally just like you, the main character, but with a villainous mustache on. Like if you draw like an evil devil mustache on someone, on like a painting or on a picture, that's literally what the enemy of this game is. It's awesome.
Like in every cartoon ever when they say, "Oh, you mean his evil twin?" and it's always just the same guy with a curled up mustache. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like the whole Spock and his evil version of Spock from the other timeline or whatever with the mustache. Yeah, so it's very very much that.
Nice.
But yeah, the game plays very well. It's there's like a dive. You have like a double jump and dive. So basically, a lot of the platforming you're going to be doing is more of an upward, trying to get from the base of a thing to the top of a thing 90% of the time, I'd say. And of course, these hats come into play as you unlock them. You got a sprint one, you got one that throws little grenade bombs, that's a witch's hat. You got one that turns you into an ice statue that it's basically like a ground pound, things like that. And as you're playing the game, the challenges come in your way and you platform across them, and then you fight a bad guy at the end of each of these themed stages. There's one that's like an old-timey train coach murder mystery, and they actually do like murder mystery things, which is funny. And then there's one that's like a movie lot, and then there's one that's like a giant ice mystical mountain with like, you know, Chinese calligraphy on the walls and things like that. So each area is very different because obviously you're kind of going to different time periods, and it just makes it it's a fun game that doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah, it seems
it's very
super cartoony, even though it's like 3D rendering. Like it reminds me of a PS1 3D platformer that's a lot prettier. Like like a Spyro or something like that, which I love, right? That's kind of my childhood. So
Yeah, in playing it, I felt like it was pretty clear that the developers had a strong appreciation for Super Mario Sunshine. The like double jump and dive and stuff, very similar to Super Mario Sunshine. There's even bonus levels, if I'm remembering right, that do something similar to Sunshine. Where Sunshine, they took away the jetpack, and then, do you remember, Josh? Do they take away like your hat abilities, or what do they do in Hat in Time?
It kind of depends. They do have like, it's kind of like a Dreamland type thing, similar idea, where either they focus on one specific hat ability, or they take them all away and say platform through this challenging room, and then you get little collectible things at the end. You know, it's pretty much just like that part of the game. You don't like the other collectibles don't really matter. The main collectibles is like the hourglass things, unless you want to get a platinum trophy, which I'm sure Steve may have if he played it on PlayStation, but I don't know.
I played it on Switch, but as with every game I've ever played in my life, I'm like, I don't know, I could do a replay of that for some trophies. I wouldn't hate that.
But yeah, so it's more like point A to point B, and then do like the challenge thing where you're like fighting bad guys. Like there's like a super like sarcastic ghost that you fight at one point, and it's just like, it kind of reminds me of like bedtime stories, and like gives me that like it's made for kids but adults would enjoy it type of thing, like a Pixar feel. You know, it's like, yeah, it's still kind of kiddie, but there's a couple of adult jokes thrown in there, which I always think is fun. The music's good. It suits it very well. It's very just cartoony and zany Saturday morning cartoon feel. And I think it was like a Halloween Town one, because we were doing like a Halloween OST like a year or two ago, and so they have in the Spooky Graveyard has a Halloween theme, and like the Mystical Mountains, it's going to sound like, you know, what you would imagine like a Chinese mountain, majestic mountain sounding like, you know. So pretty much it's kind of a mixed bag because of the different like regions all have different styles, but I think the music all in all is pretty good.
Yeah. Can I just say, I know we're out of the spooky season now, but I think it should be basically a requirement that if you're making a 3D platformer, you need to include a Halloween level. Include some sort of spooky mansion or a graveyard or something. Banjo-Kazooie did it, Hat in Time did it, and like not that many others have done it, but it always hits. It always goes so hard. I'm always a fan. We need to see more Halloween levels, and not just the entirety of Muppet Monster Adventure. Not an indie game, but any chance to shout it out.
I can think of a few. There's always like a dark, maybe not so much pure Halloween, but like a haunted aesthetic to a lot of at least one world in a lot of 3D platformers. So, like, yeah, it's not Halloween, but I remember in Spyro, once again, I'm drawing a comparison there to a non-indie game, but there was a very dark area in the first world that was like, it was like nighttime, and there was some spooky music, and I always kind of thought of that as like a Halloween adjacent thing. It's probably not if I revisited it now, but when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is kind of dark and spooky, and made me think of the fall or that time of year. So
Heck yeah! All right,
Yeah.
I'll go digging then.
Well, I do think this game is pretty good. I do have some caveats for it. I think that the platforming can be a little slippery. It's not super precise at times. I do think it can, like when it works really well. But there are times where you're going to be trying to get to the top of something or do some type of platforming move, and you're either going to think you can jump to a ledge and slip off a ledge or glitch through a ledge, or you're going to overshoot it or undershoot it, because the platforming, in my opinion, is good, but not like great. It's not like Super Mario when you're sitting there, but you're going to have a good time if you're into platformers. The thing I recently played was the DLC. They do have a DLC, which was basically pretty funny. You are on a cruise line, and it's run by seals, and it's called Seal the Deal. So it's pretty good. Had a good time with that. But yeah, I mean, it's just a really cute and charming platformer. I mean, there's not much more to say about it besides that. I do think you probably could find a better platformer out there, but this one is just super fun and charming.
It is, yeah. I will say, and some of this is like vague memories because I played it a while back, but this has basically been ported to everything as far as I can remember, PC, PlayStation, etc.
Yeah.
I played it on Switch. I would say the Switch port is totally serviceable, but if you have access to one of those other platforms, that maybe the Switch port shouldn't be your number one choice. This is probably the type of game you're going to want to play on a TV anyways, and I recall, I don't remember if it was just some frame drops or just the resolution, but I remember the Switch port wasn't always super ideal.
I think that is something we could say a lot for most games, indie or otherwise, because I feel like that's something that I've heard a complaint for in a lot of, like, if you're not planning on playing it in handheld, then, or ever, right? Because it is very convenient. But if you're not planning on it, then it probably is going to run better on something else, right? And that's kind of what I've learned as well. Like, if it's Nintendo exclusive, or there are a lot of indie games that are kind of exclusive to the Switch or make sense on the Switch. But I've learned that recently too, in playing different kinds of games on there. It's like, man, this is kind of slowing down in weird ways, and it makes sense, right? It's not as technologically advanced, even as like a PS4, let alone a PS5 or the new Xbox and stuff like that. So.
Still very, useful hardware. And I'm actually not a very like sensitive framey type of person. Like I'm not someone that's like, this is only running at 45 and not 50 FPS. But it's kind of like once I start noticing something like that, I can't unnotice it, and it does start to like it like keeps walking into frame even when I try to push it aside. It just keeps coming back up in my mind. And so, to be clear, it's definitely your mileage may vary, and it's like if the Switch Wave is the only port you have access to, this is still a fun game, and I still would say absolutely play that one. It's not a bad experience. It's just it's all down to what you have access to.
Yep.
Awesome. So for me, this might be pretty obvious what I'm going to put it on. I do think this game is one of those ones that I do think back on fondly and had a good time with, but I wouldn't call it like an all-time classic either. I do think it's just a really solid game, and I think it is worthy of being on the quest log, but this is one of the rare Josh side quest games, I would say, today. And I don't... the thing is I feel like it's like 95% to being a main quest. Like, it's almost there. If it had just... like, I don't know, just a little bit more polish, just a little bit of getting a little roughs around the edges that it has. Like, maybe if there's a sequel, maybe that one would be a main quest to me. But this one is like just going in knowing you're going to have a really fun, silly time, and it's a pretty solid game. But it's not going to rock your world or anything like that, But I did want to bring it and bring attention to it, because if you haven't played it and you like 3D platformers, it's a damn good one.
Yeah, very much for fans of the genre. And as you mentioned at the top, 3D platformers are, I would say we underserved them on this show, considering that they're one of my favorite genres. But I think that that's representative of the fact that 3D platformers, I think, are underrepresented in the indie space. And I'm sure there's a lot out there that I'm not aware of and I'm sort of stepping on the toes of. But, compared to like a 2D platformer, I think that it's so much less common for a number of reasons to see 3D platformers. There's just like an exponential increase in scope and scale and level of like detail you need to put into a 3D platformer. And 3D platformers are a space where you are competing with like you're literally gonna every 3D platformer is gonna be compared to Mario, right? Like it has set a gold standard, and so the amount of development time and resources to polish something to that level of like quality and like fluidity is so it's next to impossible for an indie team. So I think stuff like A Hat in Time, or I think like Poi, like those games I think do a really good job of getting most of the way there. And it's like if you've taken your fill of all the main 3D platformers out there and you're looking for more, they are definitely serving a need. So I would highly encourage folks to go check out this or any other indie 3D platformer.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Clive and Wrench. I think they did a release date for February. I think that's when it's coming out now. So I'm pretty excited for that one. It's very Ratchet and Clank vibes. So yeah, definitely. Or even Jack and Dexter. I think they're kind of riding the line there on both of those. So all right. Who wants to go next? I guess I can call on somebody unless somebody's super pumped to talk right now.
I like letting fate decide, right? Roll the dice.
Dealer's,
call one of us out.
Dealer's choice.
All right, let's go with the captain. What do you have for us today?
I wasn't ready, Josh. I really expected you to call Steve. I was going to use the next 20 minutes to finish the indie game that I was bringing today. Okay, well, here we go. All right, so prior to Josh joining us today, Steve and I had about a 5-minute conversation about life, and we actually discussed a little bit about the game that I'm bringing today. I am 100% confident that Steve has brought this game, and I hinted to him that it was made in 2012. Josh, I'm not entirely sure if you played this game, although it wouldn't surprise me if you had. So we decided that on air, I was going to let Steve see if he could guess. He knows what it isn't. It's not Journey, because you guys already brought Journey, so I couldn't bring Journey.
All right, it's not Journey. Now, I'm going to talk you through a number of options before I commit to a guess here. So there's a few things to consider. One, what type of game do I think Drachma would enjoy that came out in 2012? And my heart goes right immediately to like Faster Than Light, FTL. My guy likes a roguelike. He goes in hard for those types of things. He likes Into the Breach. It's like that's very much his brand. But he knows I've played it, and unless he has bad information, I've never played FTL, so I don't think it's that.
We did discuss that once. I knew you didn't play that game.
Yeah. Something that I also haven't played that I could see you bringing would be like Mark of the Ninja. I actually considered playing that one recently, a little bit of a stealth ninja action game. But here's the thing. I've played a couple indie games from this year, but you also you like to push your own comfort zone. That's what makes it tough, is I can't trust you to rely on the comfy, worn-in pair of boots. You'll wear a totally unfamiliar pair of boots. All right?
Hey, everybody's got to break them in sometime. You know what I mean? Unless you have somebody that breaks in your boots for you. Maybe when I get rich enough. Maybe when this podcast really takes off.
All right, fair. So things that I think are considerations, maybe Fez, a game that I quite enjoy, possibly Fez. I know I've played Dust in Elysian Tale, also a 2012 game. One I could see you enjoying. You say Unfinished Swan, Josh?
Yes, that's what I was.
I was
thinking,
working my way
possibly.
up to it. I
okay,
think,
sorry.
I think it would be Unfinished. It could be Hotline Miami, but I'm going to say Unfinished Swan is what you brought.
Incorrect.
Damn. Is it Fez?
Damn.
It is Fez.
That was my second guess. Okay. All right. You got to trust your gut, not your head.
So the reason I knew that Steve has played and enjoyed Fez in the past is because I'm not sure if we did this talk on air, but if anybody knows Steve at all, you know that he enjoyed Tunic this year a little bit. I'm sure at some point he'll talk about it in further detail. But I do remember discussing it with you, and you said it was like a mixture of like Link to the Past with some Fez in there. And I feel like I remember, maybe it was during one of your streams or something, I remember Leah saying the exact same thing. So I was like, okay, yeah. And that's not exactly why I fell on it. I just further discussion of why I picked a game from 2012. Anybody that also listens to Polykill, which is probably a lot of the people who listen to this show, I need a game for 2012. Fez is a game from 2012. That's why we're here. So, fortunately, Josh, I am wondering. I know Steve has played this game, and seems to me to be a very Steve game. Josh, have you played Fez?
I actually have never played Fez. I'm sorry, Steve. I have never played it. Yeah, this is on one of my shames. Like, I know I was around the zeitgeist when it came out, so I know how much people love it. I just never got around to playing it. So
yes, you need to play it. It's so. Well, I'm not going to spoil where I would put it.
Well,
it's
so much for going on the side quest.
It's either good or bad. You know what? You don't know my opinions on it.
Yeah.
You want to know my real opinion on Fez? Flabbergasted that it's been 10 years since Fez came out. It's been one decade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That means like I've been listening to like podcasts for over a decade because I remember podcasts talking about this. I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. I'm okay.
Please, Seth, tell me how Fez plays. Tell me about Fez.
Fez. So, everybody knows now. I brought Fez. F-E-Z. Fez. Developed by Polytron, which is basically Phil Fish. From my understanding, and probably most people who have listened to this have at least dabbled in Fez or know of it, but there was some controversy there. I didn't really get into it a whole lot. Honestly, I've known about Fez for a long time, but never played it right until now, and that's why I'm bringing it here. So I don't know. I know there was some weird stuff that happened, but I'm going to be speaking purely of the game, right? So publisher was Trapdoor. Initial release was April 2012, and it is basically on everything that you could possibly want to play it on. It's a refrigerator game for sure, a smart fridge type of game. Like it's on everything. So, I am happy that both of you know some things about it, because as I was going through and kind of making some notes, I was like, I might be drawing on my co-hosts a little bit to assist me with some of the explaining of this game, because I realized that even though in your head it seems like, yeah, it's a pretty simple concept, it's hard to put into words a little bit what you do in this game. Mm-hmm. So, overview, it's a puzzle platformer. That is for sure. Definitely a puzzle platformer. 16-bit art style, almost 8-bit, but too pretty to be 8-bit, right? And probably too pretty to be on any real 16-bit console, especially once you get into the main mechanic. Like, there's no way that would have ever really worked. You would have made your SNES melt. Like, yeah.
So true. It would have made my brain melt playing it back then, too.
Yeah, seriously. Star Fox was enough. This would have been wild. So, but let's get into that special mechanic. You basically learn, your character gets a fez very early on, a little like a fez hat, right, with a little tassel that comes off of it. And your character realizes that the world in which they live in is not 2D, right? Or they have like a revelation once they put this hat on. And it allows you to spin the world on an axis, right? So basically you can imagine a cube. This is the way I think about it. Imagine a cube or a block in Minecraft or something like that. Not the top of it or the bottom of it, but every side. You can flip it and you can see the 2D world from that perspective. Did I do a good job, Steve?
Yeah, so you're always 2D platforming the entire game. The only time you even see the fact that the world is 3D is when you are rotating that field of view around the four sides of the cube. So you're doing, 90-degree turns and platforming around on the different sides of that theoretical cube. Also, sometimes you're in a room, and so rather than like platforming around the outside of like a four-sided cube, you're instead just spinning around to see the four walls of the room that you're in. But yeah, you're 2D platforming and then using usually the shoulder buttons to rotate 90 degrees to a different plane.
Yes.
Right. I would say if you are still having trouble visualizing it, just look at like 5 seconds of gameplay and you'll instantly understand what they're talking about. It's pretty simple. When you see it in action, just really hard to describe in audio format.
Yes. The reason it's so special, because when you explain it like that, it's like, okay, that's kind of a cool mechanic, but it's way more than kind of cool. And maybe this is going to give some things away for later, but the reason it's so cool is because it is a 3D world, but Gomez, your character, only ever sees it in 2D. I know I'm just reiterating that. So basically, if there's a platform next to you and you flip the world, that platform might now be next to another platform. It isn't in the 3D space. It isn't actually next to that platform. But because it flips it, that perspective makes it next to it. So you can hop on those platforms and then flip again, and it will take your platform closer to another ledge or another platform. Another example of this, let's say there are ladders, and there are ladders that go up the side of a building. Those ladders aren't actually next to each other. They're actually there's one block on the right side of the screen and one block on the left side of the screen. Both have a ladder on their left side. When you flip the world, because of the perspective of Gomez, it flips and turns them and makes them even with each other, right? So if you can reach that first ladder, you can climb up to that other platform that isn't actually next to the first platform once you rotate again. It is wild and like super trippy. And honestly, like one of the most imaginative things. I know it's 10 years old, but the imagination that went into making this game was pretty incredible. And there's so many aha moments that happen as you're playing this game. It's unreal.
Yeah, and I feel like it's something that still hasn't been emulated too much since. It is definitely one of those ideas too that surprises you how fully baked it was right out of the gate, right? Like you could see this being like kind of a prototype and them doing some fun stuff with it, but then someone else coming along and like building on that idea and that foundation. But I feel like the team, Polytron, like basically knocked it out of the park first try. You're doing a lot, again, stuff like you mentioned, a lot of like, manipulating things to open up new spaces. You're doing a lot of having to like mid-platform jump, rotate the world in order to access new platforms. You're doing a lot of like
that's cool
spinning back and forth to like kind of learn different layouts of these different rotations, and then kind of memorizing it and knowing when to execute and rotate where platforms are going to appear. It does a good job of like combining spatial awareness with memory and stuff. It's just very, very creative.
Something that I learned while playing the game is really fun. Trust me. Like it's something that I think most people who enjoy platformers should experience at some point in their life, because it's just so different from most other 2D platformers that I've played. But I actually had my wife try it just so I could watch, just play it for a little bit. You know, it's her kind of game, honestly. If she's going to play a game, this is the kind of game that she would enjoy playing. She likes puzzle games and she likes platformers. It's perfect. Nice. So just play it. And I sat behind her and just watched. And to watch someone else puzzle their way through even the beginning portion of the levels, like where you first start, it is unlike anything. I know I already talked about the aha thing, but unlike anything I've ever played, where you have these moments where you just have this like revelation of like, oh my, that's how that works. Like I should have been looking over there the whole time. And it's just wild. Like it's really wild compared to like I said, anything else I've ever played. So,
nice.
But yeah, I think that pretty much does it for the gameplay. I mean, the story, the story is not really the point of the game. You learn that there is a massive hexahedron that basically shatters, and you have to go find all these little cubes, and that's the point. You're actually going and finding very small little golden cubes to try to make. You use I think 8 cubes per big cube, right? 8, yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Something like that. 8 or 9. It might be 9, actually. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But you have to find the little cubes to make big cubes. And that, as you get more and more big cubes, you unlock big doors that allow you to go to other levels. And you can beat the game by getting 32 cubes. But I'm assuming that Steve probably got all 64 cubes at some point in this game. I did not do that. I got 32, and I kind of dabbled beyond that. There are actually only 32 regular cubes, golden cubes, that you can find, like the little pieces, and every once in a while you can open up a chest that has a big golden cube. There are also 32 anti-cubes that are really cool because that's where more of the puzzly aspect comes in. It's all puzzles, right, because of the rotating world, but there are anti-cubes where you really have to puzzle out certain situations and figure out like hieroglyphic text and stuff like that. And you have maps sometimes that give you clues, and you kind of just have to piece it all together. And I'm assuming that that's where a lot of your thoughts of like the whole tunic thing comes from, right?
Yeah, both games share this feeling of like there's so much more to this world than you understand. They both have this sort of like main path, main objective. And what I think is important is that in both games, that is fun. Like if you just play Fez and just get the 32 cubes, you're still going to have a good time. It's still a very clever, very fun puzzle platformer. But kind of inevitably, I think most people are going to stumble into like one or two of these anti-cubes because they'll either get a map that tells them to do something, or they'll just notice something a little weird in the environment, and it'll like get them thinking in a different way, or there's different types of puzzles, some very very meta puzzles too, to find all these. And because there's so many different ways you can find them, you're probably going to come across one or two, and then it gives you that kind of aha moment where you're like, whoa, I think I've been missing a lot. Like, yes. I think there's way more than I realized in this game.
Yes. I didn't do a lot with it, but I will just mention the owls. That's a whole thing. Like, you realize you see things as you go, and there's maybe a statue here or a statue there. And I should have mentioned, you have like a little Navi from Ocarina of Time, like a little fairy thing that helps you out and kind of gives you hints as you go, or at least guides you, right? But then there's certain things you come up to where you click on them and your helper is like, I don't know what that is. And it's just like a little bit frustrating, but at the same time it's like, okay, that's something I'm going to have to come back to. And then once you find 4 of them, you're like, these go together somehow. And then finally you do something that's like, oh, and it gives you this whole extra realm of exploration. Like, I need to go back here and do this, which I guess kind of leads me into one of my personal negatives. And maybe it's because I'm stupid and don't know how to do this, but you can tell me, Steve, if I'm wrong. There's no fast travel from what I could tell. There's no way to jump from zone to zone at all. It seemed like I had to travel back through everything to get back other places.
It's been a while. I can't remember. Even if there is a fast travel, it's not something where you can travel to like any room. And I will say, this isn't a game that's like a 2D left to right platformer. It's basically room based.
Yes. Like
you'll be in a room or in an area, and to exit that, you're finding a door that connects to another area. And sometimes they loop around in circles and stuff. So it can get a little confusing to remember how to navigate to certain spots and get around the world. And sometimes you'll get a little breadcrumb that'll say, oh, I need to go here and do this thing. And it can be a little tricky to be like, how do I get back there? Where do I even start?
I finally kind of figured it out. There is a map structure, right, where you can kind of zoom out and see all of the little zones. Once you complete everything there is to do in a zone, it becomes like, it has like a goldish hue. So it's the game's way of telling you, you did everything here. There's nothing else you need to do here. So don't come back here, type of thing, unless you need to travel through to go somewhere else. So that's nice. And I kind of learned that was the case about halfway through my playthrough. But I started realizing, and maybe this is just a personal thing, I would get into like a big hub world, and then I would see a door, and it's like, oh, I want to go in that door. So then I'd go into that door, and then I go into another smaller hub world, or whatever you want to call it, like a smaller area that has another door, and then I can go get in that door, and then I go to another area, and all of a sudden I'm like down this 4 different branching path rabbit hole where it's like that like doesn't jive well with my personal gaming style. Like, I want to do everything I can do in the first area and then move on. So you kind of have to learn ways to manage that in your head depending on how your gaming style is, because I was finding myself getting lost or realizing I was missing things. Like, I saw a little golden cube up in the corner that I really wanted to get, but there's also a door down here, and maybe it's like my undiagnosed ADHD and I don't know which one to go for first, right? Like, it's that whole thing. You can be kind of overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that this game presents at certain points, I think. It's not really a negative at all. Like, you figure it out, but for the first couple hours it's like, oh, there's just so much I can do. Which way should I go? You get a little overwhelmed by choice, I will say. So
Right.
Yeah, and you aren't given that much direction in the game. You are just kind of set loose in the world, and they're like, yeah, go find all these different cubes. You wander around, get lost, learn the world.
Yep. Yeah, it's really cool in that way that it's not trying to hold your hand. You have a guide, but it's really not holding your hand at all. Like, it's a very subtle guide. So, but I think that leads us into, I've already talked about how the graphical art style is. It is very pretty, very striking, and like there are certain points that have callbacks to like older systems. Like, it's very retro leaning, right? Which is makes sense with the 8-bit, 16-bit sprite type stuff, and then on the rotation it kind of changes into 32-bit, right? Like, it's crazy when it rotates. It looks like a completely different game sometimes when in the rotation aspects. But one of my favorite areas, and I don't know if you remember this, Steve, but there is a sewer level that is like that greenish hue of the original Game Boy, and I thought that was awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome.
That like pea soup green.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So that's one of the callbacks to an older era, right? Another cool thing, the sunset and sunrise. So there's constantly, I couldn't really tell. I'm sure there are probably puzzles. Like I said, I beat the game, but didn't do everything I could do in the game. I'm sure there are puzzles where you can only do stuff at daytime and nighttime. And I saw clocks that I'm sure those clocks were meaning something, right? I'm assuming that you were supposed to do something with those clocks. I did not get the anti-cube or anything from those clocks, but it is really cool as you're going through the level when the sun starts to go down, because like the shading all changes and it's like in real time. It really reminds me, a lot of what this game does reminds me of Minecraft. It's almost like 2D Minecraft in a lot of ways. You're not crafting anything, but even, I'll get to it in 2 seconds, but the music reminds me a lot of Minecraft too, even. Like, it's kind of that chiptune, very smooth most of the time, and somber music. There's some upbeat songs, but for the most part, it's a fun soundtrack for puzzling things out as you're in this world. So,
yeah, it has Minecraft-y. It very much has a cube aesthetic, right? Like,
yes.
Voxel.
Yeah,
looking,
voxel.
right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like trees are squares in the game. Yep. Obviously your collectibles are square. It's all squares made out of squares. It's very much a decision that they made.
Yeah, it's very Lego.
Yeah.
8-bit Lego.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, really good soundtrack, I think. Disaster Piece crushed.
Yes,
It's been, for years and years now, it's been in rotation for my work music. It's just so like chill vibe, kind of like low key electronic. I never get sick of it.
It reminds me a little bit of, and it's not a similar soundtrack, I don't think, in tone, but it reminds me a little bit of Shovel Knight in that it sounds like a soundtrack. Like, if I listen to the Fez soundtrack, that's what I thought my Nintendo sounded like, or that's the nostalgia I have for the NES. But that's not actually what it sounded like. They really cleaned up the soundtrack, layered it in there in a way that it could have never been done on a retro system, but made it sound like it was a retro soundtrack, right? So, kind of like Shovel Knight.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. It is like of a mind to be similar with soundtracks of the influences it's drawing from, but also very much its own. And just like the graphics, it's doing way more than would have been possible on those old systems.
Yeah, it's one of those soundtracks I haven't played the game, but it's almost unavoidable when you look up like chill video game music.
Yeah, you've heard at least the main theme in this game somewhere in your life
basically.
if you're into games.
Yeah, it's a really good soundtrack. I've listened to it a bunch of times, just never played the game. I'm sorry. This makes me really want to play the game, so where are you sitting on the quest log with this if you're all finished up with all your descriptions?
I think that it would be an absolute disservice to gaming, to indie gaming, and to mankind if I put this game on the side quest, if I'm being honest.
Oh, wow.
Plus, I would really disappoint Steve, I think.
I would push back. It's not my place to decide, but I would have some thoughts.
Like tell me how you really feel.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, let me draw you all in here. Let me make a comparison you can understand. I know you're here for indie games, but let me talk about Dark Souls for a second, okay? All you kids like your Dark Souls, okay? This Fez and Dark Souls are very similar. They both do something that I think is maybe the coolest thing that a game can do, which is not teach you its rules and have the process of the game be to learn what the game is about.
Yep.
You go in and you because you've played games in the past, right? It's drawing on those Super Nintendo games of the past. You have the language of the mechanics of moving the game, but you don't really have the why, and you don't have the full picture of the how.
Yep.
And just like in Dark Souls, it's the process of observation, exploration, trial and error, all that stuff combined brings what the game actually is into focus. Rather than tutorialize a bunch of stuff up front and say, here's what you have to do, we're going to put some challenges in front of you, go do it. The game has the courage to go out and say, I'm not going to tell you what this is about. I'm not even going to tell you that there's something you don't know. I'm going to trust you to be curious enough to find that on your own, and that alone to be enough of a hook to draw you through as deep as you want to go. And it's very rare, I think, that a game does that. There's like a handful of games I could count on one hand that do that, Tunic being one of them. And I think it's always so special when they do. Plus, I love me a game where you end with a big pile of notes, like a bunch of scribbles on a piece of paper and stuff, which is very much this if you're going full anti-cube.
Yes, and I should say, add on top of what Steve said, if you're not going full anti-cube, because there are certain people like me that maybe would prefer not to take notes or too many notes outside of working. I know there are plenty of people who love to get their notebook out and write maps and things like that. Sometimes that is me if I'm in the mood for it, but sometimes it isn't. And I wasn't necessarily in that mood for Fez, but it didn't matter. First of all, you can game facts everything you want to. If you just want to figure it out, is it going to spoil it a little bit for you? Sure. But the game is really good, even without going for all the anti-cubes. And honestly, I think I only game faxed one maybe that I was just like, I'm here. It took me forever to get here. I don't know what's going on. I can't figure it out. Most of them you can figure out, you can puzzle out in your head. But yes, like Steve was saying, the Dark Souls thing, that is what does it for this game. And it's we've said it several times, but the big aha moments, if it explained everything to me, if it explained everything to the player, then you wouldn't have those aha moments. Mm-hmm. And that's why it does it so well. So yeah, it's a main quest. I mean, this is probably one of those games. It's not my favorite game of all time or anything, but I don't think that there's anybody that has ever played this game that is into either puzzle games or platform games or puzzle platformers that would say that this is less than a great game.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And cool. I mean, I know that this is an indie darling. There's no shaking. It has a reputation, right? It's it's up there with things like your Super Meat Boys and stuff in sort of that like first big indie golden era in the early 2010s. So folks are aware of this game. We're just here to tell you that 10 years later, still a banger, still worth your time.
I had basically no preconceptions about this game going in. I knew what it was. I had heard it was good. That was it. I didn't have 10 people tell me I should go play this game or anything. I knew Steve enjoyed it, right? But either way, I mean, I've played games that Steve likes a lot of jank. You know, I don't like everything Steve plays. I'll tell you that. But like, yeah, I mean, I went in about as blind as I could to a 10-year-old game that everyone talked about back in the day, and yeah, its bright spots really shine through, and it's really good.
I mean, I think it speaks to its quality that you knew its reputation going in, and you still enjoyed it. You weren't like, oh, you know, I see what maybe people were into back then, but you know, we've come a long way. It's like, certainly we have, but also a lot of the design decisions here were timeless enough to still a decade later feel fresh.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think this game inspired some indie games too. Like Monument Valley is a good example. Yes. I feel like they take a lot of inspiration. So, I mean, that's just one example of probably many that have basically played Fez as like, oh, I want to make a puzzle platformer. I'm sure it inspired many people because there are tons of excellent indie games now that play with that perspective thing. Like 2D and Top D is the same idea. It's like two different perspectives of an environment with puzzle platforming, you know. So yeah, it's pretty cool. This makes me, I'm probably going to actually install this on my Steam Deck just so it's like staring me in the face to play.
It is a Steam Deck game if there ever was one. That would be a great game to play portably. So
awesome.
I'm looking, did we ever bring Monument Valley? We brought music from Monument Valley. I think I have, right?
I actually thought about that the other day. I was like, I feel like we talked about it like a couple times because I played them for the first time a couple years ago, but I don't know if we actually brought them. Like, I can't remember putting them on the quest log.
I don't think we have. So, also good games, you know, not just take away from Fez, but Monument Valley, very good. Also, I think as we close on it, I think Fez is basically available like everywhere.
Yes.
Like,
you can probably play it on your phone if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's phone, PC, iOS, Linux. I'm sure it's on. I know it's on PlayStation. I'm sure it's on Xbox. I can't imagine that there's many systems. Switch for sure. Like it's everywhere.
You get it for like $5 or less anywhere, pretty much. So it's basically like, why not?
Yeah. At
this point, yeah.
And we talked a lot to it, but I will say, you know, if everything we said sounds interesting, go in. You know, don't look anything else up. Just go in and enjoy it. The process of discovery will be very good.
I'm personally hoping that Josh plays it and we do a revisit episode and Josh brings it again. We can talk about it again I knew we would talk about this for a long time. So
but. I know. You got me all jazzed up. I feel like I also brought Fez.
Yeah, that was a good sandwich game. So good choice when picking me, Josh. So
no kidding. Oh, any other final Fez thoughts, or you want to move on to my last pick here?
Other than we've mentioned it, but I think something that it does really well, that really brings it all together. If anybody's on the fence, it is super crisp gameplay. Like a lot of platformers can be floaty. That is not how this is. It is so crisp, and that's what makes it very accessible, I would say. So,
yeah. Importantly, the bones of it are fun on their own.
Yes. So anyway, now that we've gone on and on about it, Steve, what'd you bring?
All right. Big shoes to follow. So I'm bringing a game that I don't know if either of you have played, actually. I think if I made you do 20 questions, you would never get it. But it is a puzzle platformer named Piku Niku. Have either of you played, seen, heard of this game?
I have not. Piku Niku.
I've heard of it. I've seen the cute characters in it. I've wanted to play this for a while. It's one of those that it has interested me into potentially playing it at some point in my life. So yes, I have seen it.
I think I've actually seen this on sale on Steam at some point. So
it's got a very like it's very distinct. It's very simple looking, but like the icon is very memorable. So for folks that want to look it up on their own, it's spelled Pikuniku. Pikuniku. It is developed by Sector Dub, which the internet calls a French-British indie collective. So I'm not sure if that is like a conglomerate of indie developers that worked together on this in a way that is distinct from an indie studio. But I don't know that the folks that worked on this as a collective unit have worked on anything else together since. So I think this is sort of a standalone game from them. It's fairly well known because I think it had a pretty decent marketing push because it is published by Devolver Digital. Not the type of game you would normally associate with Devolver. Like maybe the literal opposite of the type of game you would normally associate with Devolver. It makes sense only because it is so like antithetical to what they normally produce.
Yeah.
Right. I could see this being like an Annapurna game, like, oh yeah, a cute little Annapurna game, not a cute little Devolver Digital game. Yeah.
I think of Devolver Digital, I think of like metal music and meat and buzzsaws and blood. And this is the opposite of that.
Yep.
It was released in 2019, January 2019 on its original systems, and then has since come out. It's available on Windows, Mac, Linux, Switch, Xbox, and RIP, pour one out for the boy. It was on Stadia.
Oh.
But it's not anymore. So this is a very short, very to-the-point game. It only takes 2 or 3 hours to play, so it's not one that we are going to belabor nearly as long as Fez. But I wanted to call some attention to it and just make folks aware. It is also, at its core, a 2D puzzle platformer. So a 3D platformer and 2 2D platformers is what we brought this time. Not bad.
Yes.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Very simple controls. Platforming is really not the focus. Platforming is, well, I guess it is, but it doesn't feel like the standout in the game. All you can do is jump. When you jump, your guy does this like sick little front flip kind of barrel roll thing. Looks real goofy. You can tuck into a ball and roll around. So your character is just like an oval with legs, just like a bean with legs.
Yep.
And when you tuck in, basically your legs suck up into your body, and then you roll around as if you're like a stone rolling down a hill. Makes you like a little. It gives you a little more physics, and it also makes you move a little quicker.
Kirby and rock form.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, if Kirby and Rockford could tumble forward.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you do is kick. You got those 2 big legs. You just punt people. And it's the type of game that hangs its hat much more on the vibe and the sense of humor and the goofiness than it does the actual navigation of the world. In fact, there is some more puzzle platform, some like I have to hit this switch to open this, and then I have to make these jumps to get into that door before it closes. There is some of that, but it's not really there till like the back half of the game, and it is not a focus. It's much more I'll just set you up with the intro to the game to give you context. You wake up in this like random cave. You do a little bit of basic platforming to get out. And when you get out, you in this cave, like everyone rumored there to be this big horrifying beast in this cave. And you're this little cartoony little nothing guy. So you come out of the cave. Some of the people are like acting like you're big and horrifying. Like, oh my God, look at this beast coming out of this cave. Some people are like, oh, when you were in the cave, did you see the beast? Like, did you see what the scary thing was? I've never seen anyone come out of that cave before. And then you immediately roll into this town where it's nothing but houses and cornfields. And there's these like robot overlords, basically. They're not overlords, actually. They're very friendly. Every so often, these robots will come in like big Robotnik style metal machines and suck up all the corn and then just spray money out onto the town. And so most people love it. They're like, hell yeah, these robots come and they just give us a bunch of free money. I love free money. And then there are some people that are like, well, we have so much money that there's nothing to buy. Like, I don't need any more money. They're basically being like, in fiction Pikuniku, they're like, we got inflation going on, man. This is too much.
That straight up reminds me, I'm sure it's nothing like that, but it straight up reminds me of Spirited Away, no face. Like
It's very similar.
yeah.
I mean, certainly like maybe not quite as whimsical.
Yeah.
A lot goofier than that,
Yeah.
but yes.
Yep.
Very similar thing. And so you start walking around this town. You talk to people. Folks will give you side quests or main quests, coincidental. and basically just set you off on a little adventure. You're trying to see, you're trying to figure out, you suspect, like, I don't know, seems like maybe these robots that are not giving us any choice as to whether or not they take our resources and just give us money and leave maybe aren't up to entirely good things. And so you venture off to figure out what's going on. As you talk to people, everyone has like different dialogue choices you can have. And I will say a lot of what makes the game charming is, even though it's not like long winding prose or anything like that, it has very, very charming writing. Not like laugh out loud. This isn't like Stanley Parable. I'm not like tears in my eyes. But most lines, it's the kind of writing that just gives you like a little crooked smile out of the corner of your mouth, or you're just like, all right, guys, I see what you're up to. I get it. It sometimes borders right on the edge of that like very online sense of humor, like almost like referential to like memes and internet culture and ways of speaking, but it never goes down that path so far that it becomes like cringy or hello fellow kids. It's very much, it feels written by people, modern people that are online that are using that to their advantage. So
so it's not Borderlands 2.
No, it is definitely not it's not in 2022 dropping like an Icon Has cheeseburger reference. It is more self-aware than that. All right, there's no Rickroll in this game.
I never want to give it up though.
So most of what you do, honestly, is you just go from place to place. There's like 4 or 5 different environments. You talk to the different folks. You'll get little side quests. You are trying to like collect these like hats that will sometimes give you different abilities. There's not too many of them, and some of them are only cosmetic. But you get like a hat that will, for example, let you water flowers, and then the flowers will become platforms. Stuff like that. Really basic stuff. You're just more there to have fun. Very light. Very. It's like the cotton candy of video games. Does not take much. There's some side like games and stuff. They can play this like fake Atari game, and you can play this weird like physics basketball game that feels like if it was built out a little more, it would come out as like an online party game today, and it would be called like Blast Ball or something, right. And folks would be playing it alongside Windjammers in tournaments. But just goofy. How would you describe the art style? Because it's hard for me to describe it. The best way I could say is like, it's like MS Paint, but except good art, not MS Paint art. Like it looks nice, but it's incredibly simple.
I have been waiting for a pause just so I could say it is. Imagine pretty Atari.
Oh, that's a good point of comparison.
It's prettier than Atari, but it is so like some of the landscapes are so simple where it's like this is what someone wanted the Atari to look like, but they never had the hardware to make it look this quote unquote nice. It's still very basic. The other comparison I could draw to is sometimes we compare graphical styles to storybook art, stuff like that. This is like the kind of art that you will see in a 2-year-old's book.
Yeah.
Very basic.
Very simple.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like if you were in any image software and you got the rectangle tool and you drew rectangles, and the oval tool and drew ovals, and you stack them together to make it. It looks better than what I'm describing, but that's basically what it is. It's simple shapes just put together to make kind of neat looking and a unique looking style.
Yeah, I mean, based on what Steve has been talking about the game, I think that the art style is effective, but it's not meant to wow you, but it does what it needs to do.
As with every aspect of the game, it's designed to be, I think, very, very light.
Yes.
It's not a lot to take in. I mean, This game kind of rules because you can walk up and kick anyone you want, anyone that talks, and they'll do the thing where when you kick them, they'll like they'll stand up and they'll start walking back to where they need to be standing. But you can kick them again, so if you want to, you can just sit there and like try to play keep away with them and never let them get back to their home destination. You're the type of person that likes to do stuff like that.
Wow, bully Steve coming out. It turns out the thing in the cave was always actually a monster.
That's so true. I was the monster all
Yes.
along. Oh no. Piku Niku also like Fez. There's layers.
Jeez.
So music very much in line with the art style and the gameplay, where really like plucky, simple electronics, very just like kind of chipper without being outright like catchy, toe tappy. It is exactly the type of music where I don't know that you'll really listen to it because it's so basic. I don't know that you would listen to it outside of the game, but in the game it matches perfectly. Everything about the game kind of reminds me, maybe this is mostly just the visuals and a little bit of like the tone, but it is not the exact same, but it feels of a mind with like Katamari or maybe like Nobi Boy.
Yeah,
it's in that vein.
it reminds me of that. Yep.
Yeah, it's just to give you like a sense overall of just the kind of vibe of the game. But for a game that is only 2-3 hours long, you know, you do a lot of different stuff, even if only briefly. You know, you're breaking out of jail at one point. You're doing weird physics puzzles with a worm that ate too much, I think, like nuclear waste. All sorts of strange things. There's like 4 boss fights, which is not the type of game you'd expect to have any boss fights, but all in all, yeah, it's just very. It's you get what you see, but that's a good thing, I think, for the game. Before I close my thoughts on it, any other questions or curiosities you have as it relates to Piku Niku?
Certain screenshots almost remind me of like the classic GBA WarioWare games.
Oh yeah,
Very basic, right? Very basic art style, but like it's like that, but the whole game.
Without the like plucking a nose.
Yeah. There's none of that. But just
in WarioWare.
Yep.
Yeah, it feels like a game that kind of like the developers like, let's just have some fun, make something goofy, and just have a good time with it. And that's the way you're describing it. It's how it makes it seem to me. And just like looking at screenshots and things like that, it seems like it's just like, yeah, we'll just have some fun. Like you go in, you get like 2 to 3 hours of a good time.
Yeah. Every now and again, you're looking for like a good non-committal time. You know, you don't want to go full on grind, but you also are not looking to get super invested in a lot of heavy storytelling or anything like that.
Right.
So brings us around to the quest log. I almost feel like you could argue that I'm punishing this game for exactly what it sets out to do. But to me, it feels like a perfect side quest because, you know, it's not super meaty, it's not super dense, but what's there, it's enjoyable. And like, yeah, there's some parts where the controls can get a little finicky, or there's a couple spots in the game where I feel like maybe it's a little too dialogue heavy and the game is kind of like losing that vibe of lighthearted, little dopey fun. But overall, it's a nice, sweet, good time. Perfect for the side quest. If you're looking to just pluck a good boy right off the side quest berry bush, you can plop this one in your mouth and enjoy it.
I think that this is one of those situations, and we've talked about it before, but I think this is one of those situations where it is very intentionally a side quest game. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like that's what they set out to make. They not in our words, in their own, right? But they set out to make a cozy, comfy, short little bite-sized game, and that's in a lot of ways, or in a lot of cases, that's what a side quest game is. So it makes sense.
Yeah, gonna give you some chuckles. You know, gonna satisfy you for an afternoon, or in my case, for a plane ride.
Oh, perfect
type of game for that.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, just a good time. So again, that was Piku Niku by Sector Dub.
Nice.
Awesome. So that was 2 side quests. There's Piku Niku, sorry, and we have Hat in Time, as another side quest, and then we have the fantastic, wonderful Go Play It Right Now Fez. That's a main quest today. I think that's a pretty solid lineup for this episode.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I think so too.
Lots of good Hoppy boys, as I like to call my platformers.
Mm-hmm. I tried to bring something that was about the opposite of spooky season as we could, right? We left the spooky season, and Pikuniku is the opposite of that.
Yeah. Yep.
There we go.
Honestly, we all did. We all brought very colorful and or cartoony, charming, sweet. We're all ready for a breath of like optimism, I think,
yes.
post scary game.
Absolutely.
The oppressive horror games.
Yeah, suddenly we're like, give me some color. Show me some color.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us for an episode. Let's go ahead and do some plugs. Steve, where can people find you on the good old interwebs?
You can find me personally on Twitter or Twitch at Blinkoom. That's OOM. Like maybe you should already have played Fez a decade later.
I'm glad I didn't. I could bring it here, Steve, for the people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do. But yeah, come hang out on the Twitch. Stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. We do all sorts of stuff. Retro, some indie, some modern. It's a good time. You can also find me on the Polykill podcast, although I have a sneaking suspicion we will shout out the network after this. So what about you, Seth? Where can the people find you if they just can't get enough?
You can find me at Captain Drachma on Twitter, and of course you can find myself and both my co-hosts in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. Where else can they find you, Josh?
They can find me on Twitter at Frantic Society, and also you can find the podcast on Twitter at IndieQuestPod, or you can send us an email, IndieQuestPod@gmail.com, and we will read them on the show. And speaking of the show, it's part of a fantastic podcast network known as the Polymedia Network. Let's each shout out a show. I'll start off by just saying I really have been enjoying Uncle Doug's DVD bin. It's been a really good time, really good classic films, and it's very funny. I enjoy it. So, Steve, you shout out a show. What show do you want to shout out today?
I'm very excited. One of the newest shows on the network is We Got Goosebumps, which is my Polykill co-host Trav and Dylan coming together doing a chronological kind of reread breakdown of all of the Goosebumps books. And all right, I know my demographics, okay? I'm aware of the general age range of the people listening to this podcast. You are nostalgic for Goosebumps. I'm nostalgic for
That's
Goosebumps.
Scholastic.
Don't lie to yourself.
Times, you know.
And it has been a trip to go back and re-experience some of those with them. So they read through the books, they talk through the stories, they add a bunch of commentary, trivia. I mean, they're going deep. They're talking like cover variants and stuff. So you're getting all the Goosebumps you could ever ask for, and then some. So go check out We Got Goosebumps. Seth, what's your shout out?
I think I shouted it out recently, but I'm going to shout it out again. Tales of the Lesser Medium. And the reason I'm doing that is because they recently released a new episode on Bionic Commando, the classic NES run and gun, I guess, right? And it is, I think, and I kind of told them as much, probably my favorite episode to date. I was laughing so hard. I don't know if you guys have listened to that, but it was so
very
funny. Yeah, it was so good. I love, and I've told Trav and Caleb both this, but they're lesser sods. I don't know why. I like the series too, but when they just break down an old NES game that it was the reason that game ever existed was absolutely not for the story. So that's why it's so shoddily pieced together through all sorts of different forms of fiction and stuff that's come out. And it doesn't make any sense, but that's why it just makes it so much funnier when they tell their story on it. So definitely go check that out.
Yeah, and also we should mention Polykill because Steve's on it, and it's a game all about. The podcast all about beating video games. It's the longest running network show, so you probably listened to it if you're listening to this.
I hope so. If not, do you want to hear about video games? Go check out Polykill.
For sure.
All right. How about, I guess I will send us off into the void today. Wow, that was dark. Let's all just sit down, enjoy our warm beverages while everything gets colder outside, and just kick on, like, pull up the quest log, just pick a random game and play it, and then you guys can tell us your experience with said indie game. All right, peace out, everybody. Three, two, one, go!
Coming in strong, coming in hot, boys.
That's right.